Beck and welcome to my December reading wrap up. These are the books that I finished off 2024 with, so I wanted to wrap them up and get them out of the way so I can eagerly dive into my 2025 TBR and reading goals. So the first book that I ended up finishing in December was called, hilariously, Big Witch Energy. And this is the sequel to, I think it's called Witches Get Stuff Done. I'll tell you a little bit about book one before I mention book two, and obviously this will be spoiler free. So book one, we follow Riley, and her mother has recently passed away. She's not super close with her dad, and she gets a message from her aunt who she hasn't actually properly met before, and her aunt lives on this island. So her aunt invites Riley to this island, and Riley goes, actually, I would love to connect with my mum's side of the family. And so she goes to the island and realizes that she has a deeper connection to the island than she thought, and that is witchy abilities. And they start to kick in while she's on the boat ride over, and it makes her really unwell. And then when she's there, she's really getting settled in with all of the locals. There is also a romance as well with one of the guys on the island. I think he's a librarian, and I just really liked the dynamic of it. I really enjoyed that it was communicative and it was just fun and funny, and it didn't take itself too seriously either, but it had a bit of a mystery at its core too. It also had that small town element to it where the vibe was making close friends, having a found family element, knowing the community around you and how they would support you, and I really enjoy that about reading romance books. Riley makes friends with two women on the island, and one of them is Caroline and the other is Alice. So guess who we follow in the next two books in the series? So the second book follows Caroline, and she falls for this guy Ben, and it's like a second chance romance because they dated in high school and went their separate ways, and Ben married someone, has two kids, and has now moved back to the island, and he doesn't have a great relationship with this ex-wife, so he's really raising his kids on his own. He's a doctor. He's come back to the island to, I guess, start fresh. And Caroline is within his line of sight as soon as he gets back, and he becomes like he was a teenager all over again. And he's very much got butterflies and is very much still in love with her. So Caroline also has a family curse, and this curse means that anyone in her family leaving the island dies within 24 hours. So she's really trying to get to the bottom of this family curse, and it is witchy related. Based on the magic in the first book, we then get the world expanding a little bit in the second book, and then expanding a little bit again in the third book. I enjoyed Big Witch Energy. I found it funny and fun as well. Like the first book, I gave it 4 stars like I gave the first book. I could probably give it 3 or 4 stars depending on my mood and when I chose to read these books, but I think they were honestly perfect to read around December when I had no expectations. I had a lot of other stuff going on. It just felt like it was seamlessly part of my routine, and that's why I then continued on to the third book, and that was Never Been Witched. And this one follows the third friend, Alice, and she's the more quiet one of the group. She's the one whose witchy powers haven't really taken off because she's almost like mentally blocking herself and holding herself back, and she also has very abusive grandparents who have forced her to run this antique shop and really adhere to all of their rules. She's also got an ex who is a bit abusive as well, so she's trying to really re-establish herself and cut ties with the people in her life that have not been very nice. And then this guy who used to live on the island returns to the island, and they didn't really have anything to do with each other, but they know of each other, and they've both obviously grown in the time that they haven't known each other. But this guy Colin owns a mansion, his family is rich, and he's come back to the island to pay respect to their legacy, I guess, and restore this mansion because it has gone to disarray. And so while he's restoring that business, he runs into Alice because he's shopping in her antique store, and they really hit it off. So I again really just enjoyed their romance as well. All of the books have a great romance, great communication. They are outlandish because of the witchiness and the ghosts in each book, and I just like the chaos, but it's like mild chaos that's really enjoyable. So that's why I also gave this one 4 stars. I enjoyed myself throughout this series. It was free with my Audible subscription at the time, so I just had fun with it, and I'm really happy that I read them in December because they set my reading momentum up pretty well to then go into some other books. In preparation for the third book coming out in January, I reread Fourth Wing, and I gave this 4 stars after my first read through. I gave it 3 or 3.5 stars. I just found that I really connected with this again and really just had a good time, and if you haven't heard about it, I'm sure everyone has talked about it so far. It follows Violet Sorrengail. She's I think 20 or 21, and her whole life she's been trained as a scribe. No question about it. But the day that she is supposed to become a scribe, her mother, who is the general of this war college called Basgaith, is like, you are never going to become a scribe, and forces Violet to become a dragon rider and take all the tests that come with that. And that involves like almost certain death. So she's like, I have to survive. I've got a chronic illness that really affects my joints. So she already feels like she's a bit behind the 8 ball, and she's not as strong as everyone else. She's quite small and petite as well. So she's like, all of this is working against me, and my mother wants me to fight basically to the death to survive and ensure that I become a dragon rider and get chosen by a dragon and then go through all that training as well. And honestly, it was just a fun time, and that might not sound like it's fun, but I just really liked the tension. I liked Violet's opinion of everything and her approach to things, and I just really found like the romance was fun because it wasn't just taking itself too seriously. I just enjoyed myself a lot, and again, it was another fast one to read. I got through it pretty quickly. It's also a spicy book. It's a romance fantasy, so a romantasy, and it's just something that's easy to pick up. Like the witch books, like this book, I just wanted stuff that I could get through quickly because I was waiting for a particular release, which I will get to shortly, that is quite a long book. So I was trying to get things off like a conveyor belt, like get it done so I have space in my time to read this big thick book at the end of the year. Before I talk about anything else, actually I should mention that I have a spoiler-free review of this book, and then I've also got a reading vlog where I react to everything in the sequel to this book, but that's a spoiler video. So the review is spoiler-free, the vlog is spoilers, and I plan to do a reread of the sequel as well, hopefully at the beginning of 2025. Then it was approaching Christmas time, and I thought I don't usually read Christmas books, so I might give this one a chance because I really liked another series that she's written. So I thought, yeah, I'm pretty safe to start this. That was not the case. Anyway, I started and finished Make the Season Bright by Ashley Herring Blake, and this is one that I pre-ordered and I was quite looking forward to it. However, I did not want the romance leads to get together, which is not a good sign for a romance book. I don't even have the names of both main characters in my notes. I know one of them is Charlotte. I don't know who the other one is anymore. And honestly, kind of good riddance because I'm glad that this is now off my radar. Like I finished it, it's done. And to give you a quick synopsis, this is about 2 romantic leads and they're both women. They haven't talked in years and years and years because both of them were supposed to get married and then one left the other at the altar. And after that, their lives have spiraled in either direction. Now though, both of them are friends unknowingly with 2 sisters, and the 2 sisters invite them back to the family's home for Christmas. So now they run into each other for the first time in literal years, and they have to pretend that they don't know each other and were previously engaged. It felt like both characters were so immature, and I know that they're supposed to go on a growth like story arc, that's the point of a book, but both of them were just so emotionally unsuited to each other and they didn't communicate. They were either interrupted or they chose not to communicate in basically every scene when they had alone time together in this book. More so towards like the last part of the book, they did talk about stuff, but I'm like, this could have happened so much sooner and I still probably would have hated it. Charlotte felt so emotionally unavailable because she wanted to be in control all the time, and then the other character just felt so immature because it almost seemed like Charlotte didn't understand her, but I feel like if they actually properly communicated deeply, they wouldn't have broken up in the first place. And so having them come back together again, it just felt contrived and undermining, and that's why I hated the romance in this, just completely hated it. I ended up giving this a 2 stars. I feel like at some point I should probably lower that to a 1 star, and sometimes when I finish books and I don't like them, I percolate on them for like 6 months and then I lower my Goodreads rating out of spite, so I might end up doing that. But now onto that long book that I was talking about, trying to get all those books out of the way to make room for this, and it is Madame Chonk herself, Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, which is the 5th book in his Stormlight Archive series. I am sure you've seen everything going on social media, like everyone who is into fantasy has been reading this book, and essentially the spoiler-free version I can give to you is a character in this book has been propositioned by a god and has therefore decided to wait for 10 days and then pit 2 champions against each other. And while this is leading up to this champion battle, 10 days of absolute hell is breaking loose and all of the characters now have to survive and their situations have been amped up to the point of desperation. And I love all of these characters. But when I was reading this, it didn't quite hit the levels of I'm obsessed with this and I love it that the other 4 books in the series have hit for me. And that's kind of standard for the 2024 releases, at least most, like 90% of them that I've come across, because they just didn't quite meet my expectations. And to be fair, my expectations for this were quite high. I've been waiting for 4 years for it. Brandon Sanderson writes Stormlight books so intricately, and so my expectations were like through the roof. And this didn't quite meet all of them because not only did it feel like there's a risk when you've got a fantasy book with a lot of characters that you don't give them all enough airtime. Like, I felt Sanderson gave them enough balance so that I understood what was going on with them. I understood their character growth. I understood their journey. But at the same time, it felt like it did some of them a disservice. It felt like there were significant chapters in here that could have been either cut or combined because it felt like it was a bit unwieldy. And there were times when I was reading this and I was like, I actively feel tired. Like, this is dragging on. Whereas with the other books, I never thought that. So it was just 1,300 pages that could have been drastically reduced, I think, and the purpose would have been more clear. That said, there were some pinnacles. I did tear up a couple of times, so there was some significance to what I was reading, and eventually in years and years when I go back and reread this, I'll probably pick up on extra things that I missed on my first read, and maybe I'll enjoy it more the second time around than the first time around. But at the moment I'm giving it a 4 stars. Like, I still enjoyed it, but I just wish it was a little bit shorter and a little bit more to the point because the pace definitely dragged here and there. So that is my review, a spoiler-free review of this book. I'm posting soon a spoiler review of this book so you can see why and how I actually came to these different generalization conclusions. So if you want to go and check that out, I'll link it when it's available. I finished the year on this book. I had a few days spare left over and I just decided that I needed a break from reading, and I took an accidental hiatus from reading, which was annoying to me because I was hoping to do some, preparation and pre-reading before January hit, so I had a bit of a head start, but it didn't quite work out that way. But I'm glad that I finished this behemoth. And now, before I wrap up this video, I'll launch into a couple of different stats that I get from my Goodreads wrap up of the end of the year. And my shortest book that I read this year was 94 pages, and that was Binti, which is a sci-fi novella. And then my longest was 1,344 pages, which was Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. My average book length was 444 pages, which gives me great satisfaction for some reason. The 2 books I read that was the most shelved and then the least shelved, the most shelved was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and the least shelved was by Sebastian de Castell, called The Fate of the Argosy. And then, of course, my average rating for the things I read in 2024 was 3.8 stars, which kind of checks out given that I haven't really had many 5-star reads this year unless they have been rereads. And then to top it off, the amount of books that I read in 2024, I set my goal as 65 books and I ended up reading 74 books. I wanted to push it to 75, but I think honestly reading Wind and Truth at the end of the year just burned me out a little bit because it is such a long book. But I got there, I made it, we did it, we got to 74. But there you have it, that is the end of my December wrap up. Let me know how many books you ended up reading at the end of the year. Did you squish them in like me, or did you end up reading a really long book like I did? But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments. Keep an eye out for my 2025 content. It is very much up and coming. But again, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you below and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.